How's it going, everybody? I'm Nick from Aztec Tents. Today we're out here setting up a 30x60 Jumbotrac Lite hip end Keter frame system. It's a fully certified Keter frame system. Let's get at it. Prior to coming out today, we made sure to do a site visit to make sure there's no overhead power lines. We've called 811 DigSafe, so there's no underground utilities here. We've also filed our permit to make sure that we're approved to install on this site. And this should be done for any tent install. All right, so the first thing we're going to touch on is some personal protective equipment. We've got hard hats, safety glasses, safety vest, some steel toe boots, as well as some gloves and some hearing protection. So with the Jumbotrac Lite system, we have 3 different beam profiles. This is going to be called our JT2, which is used for legs and rafters. We have 2-inch pipe used for some of the spreaders within the tent. And then we have our JTE extrusion, which is primarily used for our eave pipe. All right, so we got all of our components laid out here prior to install. We have our hip end crowns, our center crown, our hip intermediate fitting, our specialties with no cap. Then we have our specialties with our cap, standard tees with cap, our corner fittings, base plates, mid-span tensioners, pins, assembly cables, ratchet straps and stakes, as well as a little tool down here you can't see very well, but it's going to help us get our corners on our tent top onto our frame. All right, so we've got some install equipment that you're going to want to have on your truck for most any tent install. We've got our drop cloths, our pull ropes, our handheld Keter feeders, Keter leaders, marking paint, screwdrivers, tape measures, some booties to go over our shoes, stake driving equipment, stake pulling equipment, as well as a couple short ladders. So our first steps are going to be laying out all of our perimeter pipe and fittings and getting everything approximately where we want it to be. That way, once we start building out the frame, we know that it's in a place that it should be for the install. So that's what you're going to see behind me, is these guys are working on getting all that pipe laid out in kind of an exploded view. Show you kind of an overhead shot of that in just a moment. Now that we have all of our frame components in place, our next step is going to be building out our 3 main arches. And the way that we start those builds is crown down. So we're going to start with our crown fitting, attaching our rafters, and then our side fittings, and getting our assembly cable in place. Let's go take a closer look. All right, so we've got our arches built and in place, ready to tilt up. So our next step is going to be building out our first hip end, and we want to again start crown down, and we'll finish in a corner with all of our last connections. We'll take a closer look at that as well. All right, so the guys are wrapping up the build out of our first hip end. So our next step is going to be tilting our next arch into place, and then we'll get those pipes, the perimeter pipe connected as well as our ridge pipe, and then we'll move on to our next arch. As you can see behind me, we've got our frame built, waiting for legs to go on. So our next step is we're going to get some stakes and ratchet straps in the ground, and we're going to take our stake about 8 feet away from the perimeter of the tent. So we're going to use the length of our leg as a guide for how far those stakes are going to go away from the tent. And then once we've got our stakes and ratchet straps in the ground, we're going to snap them onto the frame before we start putting our tops in. That way, if we get any gusts of wind, we've got something to hold the tent to the ground. All right, we've got our stakes in the ground. We've got our ratchet straps loosely attached to the frame. So our next step is going to be putting down some drop cloths, getting our tops in place, ready to pull into the frame. And we'll show you two different methods on how to pull tops. We're going to do some of the panels while the frame is on the ground. Then we'll lift the frame up on its legs, and we'll do the last panel when it's up in the air. All right, let's get started. All right, so we've got 3 of our panels installed behind me here. We've got our jacks in place, legs ready to go in. So our next step is going to be raising this side of the tent, and we'll get our legs on, and then we'll move our jacks around to the other side of the tent, lift that side up, get our legs on, and then we'll pull in our last panel. So let's get started. All right, we've pulled our last panel into place. We've got all of our legs straightened out. So next steps, we're gonna tension our 2-inch ratchet strap guy lines, and then we'll move on to our 1-inch ratchet tensioners to tension our valance down to the base plates. And we'll also get all of our mid-span tensioners in place to get the center of our tent tops tensioned out. All right, as you can see behind me, we've completed the install of the 30x60 Jumbotrac Lite hip end. Everything's nice and tight, and we're gonna start takedown. So if you need to figure out how to take it down, just watch this video in reverse. Let's get started.